Hi folks, Puff All the Weed here with my fourth and final part of my Cruella review. Just about evil and revenge. I don't think it's spoiling too much to say Cruella de Vil is an evil character in the cartoon, and so even though she's a hero in this movie that you're sympathetic with, you'll know that by the end of the movie she'll still have some evil tendencies that lead to being able to be willing to harm animals. So that's not really spoiling anything. Hopefully it doesn't spoil anything to say that there is a theme of revenge in the movie too. So the reason I mention it is because as a fairy witch, things that I watch on TV or movies, streams and stuff, or videos that I make relate to the real world, like the earth and the planet that we live on. So yesterday I happened to see the movie Cruella in the daytime. And then later that night, you hear the news about the drone strike that killed the ISIS-K person responsible for the suicide bombing in Afghanistan. And you can sense the feeling of revenge amongst many Americans, like a bloodlust type of revenge, which is a type of evil feeling. And the thing about the Cruella movie, without spoiling too much, you know that she's going to remain in somewhat evil character at the end, partly by giving in to revenge. And while revenge seems like a satisfying type of evil, like, well, it's only evil for evil. The whole thing about evil, and as I mentioned before with the Sith thing, the reason why the Sith, there's always two, a master and apprentice, and the apprentice always betrays the master. There's always like a necessary betrayal. It's because evil itself is a betrayal, and it has to be trained. One evil person makes another person evil. They're betraying a natural order of things. Excuse the hair. And one person making the other person evil, then that person betrays the person who made them evil. That's something that's going to happen here in America between like Trump and DeSantis and Putin and Zuckerberg. Like, they're all part of an evil network, and one of them is eventually going to betray another one. And the best thing for anybody to do in that whole network, because the network extends to millions of other people, is go ahead and get ahead of the betrayal curve and betray some of these people. And by betraying them, as I think I mentioned in the last video, people like Michael Cohen are accepted back as Americans. He said, hey, you betrayed Trump, you're no longer a Trumper, now you're an American again, and we love you for having betrayed the evil and come back to humanity. It's not just about America, it's about all countries. You've betrayed your country no matter what country you live in, if you're trolling for Trump and Putin. So come back to humanity, and we welcome everybody back. But you have to betray the evil, because that's how we're going to get rid of it. Now it's all collected into one thing, and we can shrink it down by peeling people off of it. Otherwise, when you seek revenge, you end up with some evil left yourself, or you end up perpetuating an evil cycle, returning evil for evil, and the cycle continues. Now, in the case of Afghanistan, the appropriate thing to do is to acknowledge, hey, America propped up Osama bin Laden. America funded the Taliban and the Mujahideen, not only with money and weapons, but we promoted that corruption upon Islam. We promoted a corruption upon Islam, that a terrorist interpretation of Islam. It's not Islam at all. A terrorist interpretation that America put forth. We put the clerics out there and stuff to get this idea out there way back in the 80s. So this is something we created, and it's now coming back to haunt us. And the best way to stop it is to fully apologize for it. Just like Byron Allen was saying in a talk with the beloved community about the person who wrote the book that Hitler based his ideas on. Well, the person who wrote that book was an American writing an anti-immigrant book, back in the early 19th or 20th century. And Hitler was inspired by that and thought that Americans would agree with him, because he thought that's what American was like. And there's too many Americans who are like that, even to this day, who are anti-immigrant, KKK, nationalists, fascists. That's why we need to be against that. But we don't need to revenge against that. That is evil. Now, the other thing about evil is it's going to betray itself. That's built into the evil, as I was talking about with the Sith. There's going to be a betrayal. But you can't just sit back and wait for it to betray itself. You can't just be like, oh, it's going to betray itself. Let's let it betray out. You have to do something about it. You have to confront it. So my classic example is Saruman and Grima in Lord of the Rings, and how it's a very pivotal moment when Grima turns on Saruman and throws the planet Palantir down to try to kill him. He wouldn't have done that anyway, just from being abused all the time by the evil master. But he did that because the war came to him, or the fight and the adventure came to him, and the good guys were pursuing them, like they won the battle. So it's like, even though you don't want to fight evil with evil, it would be much better to get to the truth and say, hey, we're somewhat responsible for creating this evil in the first place, and we want to undo that and set a new path, like change military over to green energy conversion and rescue squads. We do that in America with the biggest military. We'll set the standard for other countries to follow suit, lead by example, all work together, especially America and China working together. We'll make a great world really fast and undo all the evil. There'll be enough for everybody all over the world. We can easily do that with just a shift in attitude. So the shift has to be from revenge to like atonement and repentance and making up for how we contribute to things in the first place, which we certainly did in Afghanistan. That should be a very clear example of that. Now, as far as, so what do? You confront the evil, you call it out, and you try to redeem the people who are involved in it and get them back to the side of humanity. And that's where I think there's a message in Cruella, because she continues on with some evil by giving into revenge, or by by letting out her evil to address evil. Now, if we can stop that cycle, we can save humanity. But I do think this is a great movie to watch, to see, and I don't want to spoil much of it, but just to see these dynamics between people, between power, between how people do things. And to know that there's other ways of going about doing things. So I like to think of, like, that's one thing I think is genius about it, is there's some genius ideas in it. And we need genius ideas, and to follow the genius ideas for revolutionary new ways of doing things. Meaning, hey, the old way of doing things was war. War's obsolete. We're not doing that anymore. We've got a new way of doing things. So let's do that. Let's all work together. Thanks for watching, sharing, and commenting. And thank you to Cruella and all the people involved in putting that together. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I do hope that we can take seriously that there's evil in this world, and that the people who are even perpetuating the evil are victims of the evil and need to be rescued from it. It can be the best way. Yes, people are justified in some ways returning violence for violence, or people have always felt that way, but that's what keeps this cycle going. So if we can break the cycle and say, let's have a new approach and say, we want to redeem you and bring you back from evil ideologies you've been part of. That's how we can rescue DeSantis and Trump and Putin even, and Zuckerberg. Or we can at least isolate them and rescue the other people who are under their influence, and isolate them so that their influence is minimized to nothing. So thank you, and see you soon.